Good evening, everybody. Have a seat. Good evening, welcome. It is wonderful to have you here. Smart to be here tonight before the snow starts falling again tomorrow. I'm Allison Clarkson. I have had the pleasure and the true joy of producing Farmers Night for a very long time, and it's exciting to have a team now. We now have a team. So ever since I went to the Senate several years ago, it's a lot to do. So we have a team of John Bartholomew, State Rep John Bartholomew over there, and Mary Catherine Stone, our newlywed, who's still a newlywed till next week, who we celebrated last year, who got married on Farmers Night when the Vermont Symphony Orchestra was playing. Anyway, it's wonderful to have you here in the People's House, in this glorious living museum that we're all lucky enough to work in and enjoy performances in. We could not be here without our incredible state curator who and his staff keeps this building the living museum that it is, or our Capitol Police who stay extra time to keep the building open for us on Farmers Night, and our wonderful Sergeant-at-Arms office who enable a lot of the workings of Farmers Night. So we're very grateful to all of them for making it possible to do Farmers Night and keep up this tradition, this hundreds years old tradition of Farmers Night, which began, as you know, with legislators taking a night a week to entertain themselves. They read poetry to each other, they performed plays, they played music, they were, they took a night to really celebrate all their skills and talents. To today, where we celebrate the incredible breadth of talent in this state. This has become the showcase for Vermont talent. And so I just want to tell you about next week. Next week, we have the Vermont Symphony Orchestra coming, and they're going to be doing a whole array of great music. And of course, traditionally, we now have a high school students premiere a composition of a Vermont high school student. So in addition to Bach, we're going to have a Mount Mansfield high school students composition. So it should be a terrific evening, and I urge you to come back. And if you're coming, I'd come early because it sells out, as you know. So one of our strongest partnerships at Farmers Night is our partnership with the Vermont Humanities Council, which goes back a long time. And so we're really grateful to them for sponsoring tonight's performance. And so their fabulous executive director, Christopher Kaufman-Ilstrup, is going to introduce tonight's performance. Thank you all for being here.
You guys ready to perform? Great. Raise your hand if you've read Gather. Wow. Oh, amazing. That's incredible. Thank you. Thank you for reading it. So as Allison said, my name is Christopher Kaufman-Ilstrup. I'm the executive director. I'm not on Instagram. I'm reading my notes. The Vermont Humanities is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Library of Congress, both of which could use your support right now. On behalf of the Vermont State House and Vermont Humanities, I'm really pleased to be here for Farmers Night again this year. We're so grateful to Senator Clarkson and Representative Stone and Representative Bartholomew for organizing this series every year. It really brings a lot of light in the darkness to Vermont. These may be challenging times, but I'm really heartened by our collective decision to come together in community to celebrate the arts and humanities every Wednesday night for 3 months of the year. Before we begin, I'm going to introduce our guests, but before we begin, I would like to thank some sponsors of the Vermont Reads program. We have longtime support from the Trout Lilly Foundation, the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation, and the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation, and the Alchemist Foundation. Tonight's particular event is underwritten by our dear local friends at Hunger Mountain Co-op, just down the road. And I also feel like it's important to acknowledge the recent passing of our friend Lois McClure, who is really, truly one of Vermont's great heroes. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers. Micaiah Bay Galt is our interrogator for the evening. She is sitting next to Ken. She'll be in conversation with Ken. She is both a member of our team at Vermont Humanities and also a writer in her own right. She is the author of the novel Goodnight Stranger, which was nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award and longlisted for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize. Micaiah has been a fiction fellow at Breadloaf and a visiting writer at the Vermont Studio Center. And her fiction and essays have appeared in publications like Tin House, The Sun, Poets and Writers, and the New York Times Modern Love column. Micaiah directs the Vermont Book Awards for us, and in addition to her work at Vermont Humanities, she teaches in the MFA in Writing program at Vermont College of Fine Arts. Kenneth M. Cadow is an educator and writer who lives in Pompanusick, Vermont. Gather is his first young adult novel, and he is currently the co-principal of Oxbow High School in Bradford, helping to oversee around 400 students while also writing award-winning novels. About this book, he says, "In my teaching career, I have encountered dozens upon dozens of stories like Ian's, kids whose spirits are threatened to be crushed by societal disregard. The kids who are able to pull through by the ingenuity of their skill set and the strength of their character, as well as the care of their larger communities, are some of the strongest people I have ever had the pleasure of meeting." Cadow is the father of 3 remarkable adults and lives with his wife and their dog, Quinny. We are especially excited to report that, as you just noticed, Gather is now the most popular Vermont Reads title in the history of the program. It is the 23rd book in the series. 6,500 copies have been distributed around the state already. We expect to send out about another 3,000 more in the next 5 months before the program year ends. It's being read in 91 different communities across the state in 120 different community projects. Please give a warm welcome to Micaiah Bay Galt and Ken Cadow.
Okay, let me make sure this is good. Good, okay. Oh, I feel so lucky to be here tonight. This is so fun. Ken and I have talked together before, not in a setting like this, but we've had conversations like this, and he's one of my favorite people to talk to in this way. It's really wonderful. So I think what we'll do is I'm just going to ask some questions to get Ken talking, and he'll read from the book, and then we'll leave some time for questions from you. Can I just real quick get a sense of you all, because I love to know how many of you live in Montpelier? Okay, so then I'm assuming most of the rest are from other Vermont towns. Is anyone from out of Vermont? Oh, hi, welcome. And how many people here are educators? Yeah, that's what happened at our last event. A lot of educators. And readers, obviously, since so many people have read. That's great. Okay. One of the reasons that I love talking with Ken so much is because I love the story of how this book came into the world. It's just a really good story about years of hard work and then kind of some really great success. Do you feel like you could just start by telling us the story of writing and then publishing the book?
Sure. I hope I tell it the same way. I wrote, back in 1999, I was doing an oral history, and I visited a bunch of hunting camps, and was really struck by the way students, kids, I mean, they weren't students there, they were teenagers, were really leaning into the conversations. And And it was multi-generational. It was beautiful. You know, grandchild, dad, grandfather in one camp, a great-grandfather and a great-uncle. And the kids knew the stories by rote. And I just thought it was just such an incredible thing to witness, this rich tradition about which I knew nothing. And the stories that they told were really distinctive. One of the themes, in addition to children really leaning in a way that I wasn't used to seeing, one of the other themes that came out in 1999 and hasn't really changed much, maybe has elevated a little bit more, was folks coming from out of town not understanding the pre-existing culture and buying a lot of land and posting it. And so that the opportunities for hunting for this way of life were shrinking. And one of my favorite lines from my intro to that oral history was, it's unusual to think of the person toting the gun as the underdog. But then I was thinking, okay, well, what if, and a kind of cool story, I was always looking for some kind of plot. What if a kid whose identity is very much about being in the woods, about hunting, if that is something he looks forward to more than, you know, Christmas morning, falls in love with a girl who just moved to town, whose family he later finds out, spoiler alert, there are going to be a lot of those, so I'm just getting that out of the way, falls in love with a girl and it gets kind of really deeply attached to the family, and then finds out they're the ones who posted his favorite hunting grounds. And that was the beginning, but I kept trying to tell that story in third person. And the kid was just too whiny. And so I would put it away. And then a couple years later, I would try again, and I would put it away. And then literally 20 years to the day that I wrote down that plot, it was Veterans Day Saturday. I go up to my cabin pretty much 2 mornings every weekend and write for a while just to keep the flow. And I was reworking an essay that had gone from kind of clever to really trite. And so I just thought, okay, I'm done with that. Literally flipped the page, and on a new page, Ian ran onto it, the main character. And I didn't know at first that he was the person. And so I saw him standing in front of the school sign, not wanting to go in, and then I thought, okay, well, how did he get here? Oh, he ran down a hill in the rain. So I wrote that, and then I thought, I don't want to see him. I want to see through his eyes. So I looked back through these eyes at the school doors, and the Sharp walked out. And she said, Ian, what are you doing? And then I at that point didn't realize that he was the character for that story. And that's when I had my aha moment, and I just got the heebie-jeebies, and I took a long walk in the woods just to kind of think, crap, his name wasn't supposed to be Ian. But I wasn't going to I was not going to argue with the Sharp either. And so then I thought of what could Ian be a short name for? And just because I told this story on the way in tonight, it's fresh in my mind. But and that's really the beginning. And then really as Ian became more and more real, I stopped writing this for anybody except Ian. It wasn't intended for any audience. It was intended to tell a story that I felt needed to be told. So I didn't have an audience in mind.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's just a magical event for a writer when the character arrives so suddenly and is then so real, so much a part of your memory, though he's just arrived a moment ago. Do you want to, so much has been praised about Ian's voice, that you stayed so true to his voice. And I have a story that I love about that. where you were trying to, do you know which one I'm talking about? Where you were trying to,
Probably.
you were trying to describe what the dog meant to him. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Not yet.
You were trying to describe, what the dog meant to him. You spent sort of pages.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Yes, I do.
tell them that story.
All right, so an early reader of the book said, Ken, this isn't about a dog. And I was thinking, yes, it is. And so then, my persnickety self, I decided I'm going to write it in there, why it's about a dog. So I had Ian on the car ride home thinking about why it's about a dog and thinking about how all of these intake forms that have been filled out on his behalf, all of the clipboard questions that he's been asked, as he calls them, Gather, the dog, only showed up in the other column. And that's exactly what makes us human, speaking of Vermont Humanities, is what shows up in the other column. And that's why so often the data doesn't tell the story the way it needs to be told. We can't mistake data for witnessing, and we do too often. So Ian, he didn't get that far, but he got pretty far in this sort of, and then I read it aloud to myself the next morning, and I thought, that is me talking. That's not Ian talking. And so I scratched it. I got rid of it, and I wrote, and Ian's whole thing was, I love that friggin' dog, which said just as much, right?
Yeah, so to revise pages of very eloquent explanation of the meaning of this dog, to revise that into, I love that friggin' dog. It's so beautiful.
I might have actually removed the friggin'.
Oh, well. It's fun to say. And then, so then tell us about, one of the things that's fun is the book, sort of just the timing of the book being longlisted for the National Book Award before it even came out, before anyone had seen it. And then on the day that it was released, you found out that it was on the short list for the National Book Award. And I know, like, the way Lisa tells that, she kind of saw that news and knew how big of a deal that was, his wife, but couldn't even reach you. You were in a meeting, you were at school.
I got a text from my editor who said, Ken, I'm so excited to let you know your book has been longlisted for the National Book Award. And I thought that was, okay, that's like 400, 500 books, great. And I wrote, wowie, thanks. But I was in a meeting at a table twice this size with the principals and the superintendent and all the people from the central office in the district. But I copied that text and I sent it to my wife and said something like FYI. And then my phone started like shaking the table. And so I threw it into my briefcase. And then that night I had a school board meeting that was all about justifying to the school board how I wanted to spend some ESSER funds, so I got ready for that. And then we had the school board meeting, and then I got home at 8:30 that night, and there's champagne on the kitchen counter. And I was like, what's this for? And so Lisa is much more connected to the world of literature and the publishing world than I am, and she explained to me that it's 10 books long, and that it's a really big deal. So
yeah. Do you want to read a section that kind of captures Ian's voice, just to get that voice in the room?
Yeah. So he's talking about the dog. I thought I'd name him Hunter at first, since he knew how to take care of himself. But since he was eating mostly vegetables he found on his own, well, that's how I came to name him Gather. So something I have to say is about the word gather. It means a lot of things, like gathering food, gathering your thoughts. When somebody who listens, somebody like the Sharp, when she asks you what it's like to grow up the way you're growing up, you gather all these parts together, parts of your life, and all these stories of things from way before. things that get mixed up with what's happening right then. Those stories don't come out like a goddamn timeline. They come out like compost. All the leaves, the coffee grounds, fireplace ashes, apple cores, tea bags, onion skins, eggshells, corn husks, potato peels, everything that turned to dirt at one time or another, doesn't matter when. It belongs with whatever you've got growing out of it right there in front of you. Doesn't matter either if you're talking about sugar snap peas, tomatoes, pumpkins, or weeds. You can't go pulling all the dirt away from the roots, trying to put it in some kind of order so you can understand it your way. You kill it if you do that. Stories we tell come out like the way you walk the woods if you want to know it. Zigzagging, doubling back, maybe tripling, sometimes enough to find out that the parts you know the least about are the parts closest to home. You don't just make some frigging beeline to some hill like you're trying to get your steps in. I just don't understand people like that. I don't think they're from around here. But I feel like you need to understand this. Our stories from around here come out like the way we keep our work shed. You go in there, see what you have lying around, some of it being old as hell, some of it being stuff you might have even had the money to buy for yourself. You move something, you find something else. You brush it off a little, then you use it or set it back down. But you need it all to piece together how things come to be the way they are now, how you come to be who you are. And when things go to hell in your own life, the word gather means something else all over again, because there's a lot of good people. Some who you know, some who you only just met. And the ones who matter, they listen. They gather on your side, and at least they try to help you, even if it might not all work out. I know that for a fact. All that being said, I am definitely getting ahead of myself here. Right then, I was just goddamn glad to have that dog.
So nice. It's really nice. Thanks. The book really does not shy away from hard subject matter. You know, so there's addiction, food and housing insecurity. It's hard. It's really painful. You all know, because so many people have read it, that it's painful to watch Ian go through this. You become so attached to him. It hurts. I feel, so grateful that you made this book that invites people to feel empathy for a character and to see the world through his eyes, to experience that. I think that's part of the sort of outpouring of support that we've seen for the book. I'm wondering, at what point, I'm wondering if you knew you wanted to write about these issues, if you had something you wanted to say about these issues, or if this hard stuff just came along with the character when he showed up like that.
Yeah, I did want to write. It's interesting because some of the hard stuff happened much further along into the book because I was kind of shying away from it myself. And I think we tend to glorify rural. And there's a lot of beauty in rural, and that's in here. But the pain in rural poverty, I've seen it, particularly as it manifests itself, sometimes through schools. And I'm not going to get, I don't want to get political here. What I want to say is that I think a lot of times what we think is in the best interests of the student is not, and it's way more classist than we might realize. Like if you look at socioeconomic status and grades, there is a profound correlation. And then you look at our athletic eligibility policies, and you can't play if you aren't passing. That's classist. You don't have to whittle away too many lines to realize that. And I've seen it manifest itself in many, many ways, and some of the most painful ones, and probably one that's more painful than anything I ever witnessed is in the book. And I'll say I think that we don't have a language, or we don't teach a facility to talk about that particular subject very well. And that's one thing. One of the things I want to say is I don't want this book to become like a hair shirt. You read it, you felt bad, so you feel like you did your duty. And I just don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that is exciting to me about the book is the sort of constant intertwining of moments of connection and moments of conflict. So there's despair, and then there's the sense of hope. How did you do it?
By taking a lot of walks in the woods. every time, for good and bad. I have a couple passages with it. I want to, I'm sitting in here looking at the decorum of this place and thinking I don't want to ruin it. And what comes to mind sort of as I was sitting here tonight thinking I'm shying away from telling this passage, but I'm not going to because it has the F-bomb in it. But I also remember I was a total J.R.R. Tolkien nerd growing up, and there's this one place where Gandalf in Rivendell says, he gets scolded for saying some words that are actually in a foreign language, and he says, I'm not going to ask your pardon, because if they're not going to be heard in every corner of the world, we have to act now. And I feel that same way. If we don't learn to listen, we're going to hear these words all over the place. So I'm going to start with a passage that was probably the single hardest for me to write, that was also, that also has only been brought up once in probably 30 book visits. And it just speaks to me that we need to learn to be, we need some facility for these difficult conversations. It's in here. There we go. What's happened is Ian and his mom have gotten a tax bill, and they have back taxes to pay, and they have a meeting at town hall that day. So he wore a shirt that he bought at a thrift store to school. I was in the halls a lot on Thursday, left geometry early to get breakfast on account of not being at Angel's Cafe that morning, was late to biology on account of my still eating. So the whole time I'm sitting next to Sylvia in biology, I see Zach looking at me, actually pointing at me and whispering to Rachel. And I'm wondering what the hell's up with the rich kids. I found out when we were getting dressed after gym when Zach comes up to me and says, "You stole my shirt." I'm like, "It's my shirt. I've had it a long time." "I've been missing it a long time," he says, and he gets loud. "You stole my shirt." I am so sick of loud, and so I'm like, "It's not your fucking shirt." And he says, "Yes, it is. You stole my fucking shirt. It's an Abercrombie." I'm like, "What's an Abercrombie? I bought this fucking shirt with my own money I earned myself. My mom didn't just throw money at me like your parents do for you." He's like, "If you actually paid for this shirt, you'd know what Abercrombie means, you white trash, stupid, jealous fuck." Then Mrs. C pokes her head in the locker room and yells, and the next thing you know, she's walking me and Zach to the main office, me not having buttoned the shirt, let alone tucked it in. So we go to Albertson's office, and Zach practically has to duck to get in the door. He's so goddamn tall. Albertson's all sitting there like a judge. I'm like, "The shirt wouldn't even fit him." "That's because you stole it a long time ago," Zach says. "I've kept on growing. I'm not a runt like you." Albertson's all, "Zach, that's not going to help us get to the bottom of this." And he looks, and it doesn't look like we're going to manage that today. Then he looks at me. "Do you have a different shirt you can wear for the rest of the day, Ian?" I can't believe this. "You don't believe me," I tell him. And he's all bullshit calm. He's like, "The shirt appears to be inflammatory. Until we get to the bottom of this, do you have a different shirt?" I'm like, "I can't believe you don't believe me. I'm not wearing my goddamn gym shirt." So Albertson calls the nurse. "Pam, we have a situation here. I'm wondering about the spare clothing closet. And if you could please, Ian, what size do you wear? I'm not changing my fucking shirt." "Ian, watch your mouth." "Okay, Pam, please bring whatever men's medium or large. Whatever you can find will be fine." And that's when Zach has his big idea. My mother puts a red dot on the size tag so she knows what closet to put them in after laundry, he says. Check the tag on the runt's neck. Albertson's all, Zach, he's having a difficult day. Please use his name. Zach says, okay, Dorian's neck. My mind is everywhere and nowhere. Whatever Pam can find will be fine. I'm going to the goddamn town hall, wearing whatever Pam can find. It will be fine. Then I'm gone. I'm watching myself like I'm the camera on the ceiling, and I'm saying, your mama puts away your fucking clothes, Zach? Albertson's all, watch your language, Ian. Do you mind if I look at the tag? And now I know. I'm sure as goddamn hell, there's a red goddamn dot on it. I pull the shirt off and shove it into Zach. He falls back into the bookcase, and a few pictures fall off, and maybe one of Albertson's goddamn mugs busts. And Albertson jumps up, and I open the door out of his fuck of an office, and Pam is standing there with a couple of long-sleeve T-shirts, but I'm so pissed I'm probably crying, and she loses her smile. I walk past her out to the office, and I yell, fuck this place, probably 5 times as I push through 2 sets of glass doors out into the parking lot.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah, the injustice of it. So you were asked about it at, you think, one school visit? Did it?
It was not a school visit. It was in a town up by the Canadian border, and a woman had had kind of a similar experience.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't wear a new dress until the beginning of 7th grade. All of her clothes had come from consignment stores, and then the day that she wore her new dress, she said that she was so excited to go to school, and nobody noticed.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you decided to read it.
Oh, thank you.
It was good. It's just interesting to think about it being painful to write, painful to watch your character who you love go through that. I just saw the local high schools just put on a production of Hadestown, Montpelier High School and U32. And it was stellar. These kids did an amazing job. I've never seen anything like it. And I've not ever seen it on Broadway. I had never seen it before. So it was my first time seeing it. I was really moved by the final song, in which they kind of, because it's the Orpheus story and it really doesn't end well. And they were saying, the song says, why do we tell this story? Why do we tell it again and again? They say it's a tragedy, it's a sad song. And then the idea is to know the line here, I looked it up, to know how it ends, yet still begin to sing it again, as if it might turn out this time. That's why we tell it again, we tell it again. I was so moved as a writer by that idea that we tell the story, we do the art again and again, because that is what we are meant to do. That's how we deal with the dark times. That's part of what humans need. They need to hear the story. They need to hear it again and again, even if it's hard. I just wondered if you had thoughts about art in hard times, about the role of writing, about the ways in which we need that work.
I do. He doesn't see himself as much of an artist, and I think that it was a while into the book when I realized that this needs to be a school project for Ian, the telling of this story. And I'm wondering and thinking that with our focus on literacy, which is absolutely so critical, we focus more on reading than we do on writing, and writing is equally as important. And the other day I was down in my basement looking for something I wrote when I was a kid, and I found some stuff that my mom had saved for me, written in 1.5 inch high letters. And anybody who remembers Judith Viorst and Alexander in his terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, as As a first grader, as a 6-year-old, I wrote Kenny and his terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and it explained. And it's in the basement. For me, I think before that, I was writing to process. And I do think that that's a critical thing to recognize. To recognize stories in others, we have to balance that with telling our own and writing our own. And so a critical piece of literacy that feels less focused on, that needs equal, when we teach kids to write, we help them empower themselves to tell their story.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. The Vermont Reads program that Gather was a part of, in case you don't know, I feel like we always think everyone knows about this program, but it means that basically for a year, Vermont Humanities supports communities all over Vermont in putting together programming that uses this book as a jumping off point for discussion, for activities. So we provide free books for communities, as Christopher was saying. And many of the communities do so much more than just a book group. So we have had staged readings related to Gather. There was a school that did all their activities with kids around making dog biscuits to sell, to raise money for the Humane Society. They made dog beds.
Yes.
It's kind of amazing. There were films have been shown connected to the book. It's been read in some correctional facilities, and I think incarcerated people there were reading and staff at the same time. So a lot of discussion around the book. It's really exciting to me.
My first visit to a correctional facility is on March 14th. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. Well, I wanted to just ask you if you've had any experiences that you wanted to share from sort of doing this work. You've been involved in a lot of the Vermont Reads programming around the state. What have you noticed? What has happened?
Yeah, I've noticed there is an incredible sense of community in this state. And there's also, I keep thinking, well, I wonder, when I go to a new one, and some of these are Vermont Reads, and some of them are just, I've been invited by the local bookstore or the librarian, but I think, well, which community might this resemble? And every single one of them has been different, focused on different parts of the book. There are some definitely common ones that get brought up, but really, sometimes they focus on education. Sometimes they focus on poverty or homelessness, and the ones with the kids have been particularly rewarding. Because it was great when someone asked me, there were a whole bunch of 7th graders in St. Johnsbury who'd just read the book, and someone asked me, does this book really resonate with 7th graders? And I said, or with younger kids or with young adults, and I said, well, let's ask the experts. And they were sitting right there, and somebody said, so. Their teacher was there with them, said, thumbs up, thumbs down, and it was just awesome, because the kids just gave it, they also got, I think, a pizza party for showing up, but but it was, and then the kids talking to me afterward, the kids who want to write, those are the ones who linger afterward, who somebody sticks around to give them a late pass to get back to class if it's a school event. That just gives me such hope, such hope. And so yes, the ones where the kids ask any advice, or they just want to tell me about their book. And it's true, we don't have that many elevators in Vermont, so an elevator pitch means nothing around here, So sometimes it's kind of like I got to figure out how to move them on, but it's the conversations with the kids and the emails that I get from some of the Vermont Reads students or from the teachers who have done the program are just so, they're really touching, and I know that it's ringing true.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Do you have a section that we had sort of talked about? Is there a section that has sort of really resonated with Vermonters, either unexpectedly or you expected it to?
Yeah, I would say the section that I want to read that resonates most with really across the generations is, I think I can find it pretty quick here. I actually have sticky notes. So Ian's been sort of, one of Ian's coping, it's not a coping mechanism. And not just a purpose. It's just, love. It's what he does, is with the dog. So the dog is always in the back of his mind, and he's had a pretty long day, and he realizes he hasn't done anything with the dog. So they go for a walk in the woods in early December, late November. So I'm set up in the woods on this log, and the air is still as hell, and Gather's nosing around, crunching through the leaves, not finding much to eat, and I barely hear this tearing sound. I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from, and then I realize Gather, he's looking right at it. There's a huge friggin' piece of bark that just at that moment, deciding it can't hang on to its big dead elm, must be 12, 15 feet long, peeling back off and looping itself away from the trunk. We watch it drop, taking along a dozen rotted branches from a white pine and breaking up and folding on itself as it comes down. That's the thing. People are like, who cares? But you don't think about how this stuff ends up on the forest floor. Leaves, sure, that's obvious, especially in fall. But branches and bark and all that, you don't really think about it. Outside of a big windstorm, it's just plain unusual to see something big like that drop in the woods all by itself on a still day, except it isn't all by itself. There's life going on between the dead bark and the dead trunk of the dead tree. When you really want to know the woods, you care about things like that. Gather thought so too, being as how once that bark hit the ground, he goes over and sniffs it. That's the kind of thing you tell most people, they couldn't give a shit. But I could have told that to Gramps or Ansel or even Drew, and they would have known what I was getting at. It's rarer than seeing a shooting star. It's the difference between knowing about the woods and knowing the woods. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Oh, it's nice. I love the applause. I'm going to ask you to read one final passage, and then I have one quick final question for you, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the passage is the swimming pool.
Oh,
Will you read the swimming pool
sure.
scene? Okay.
I think a preamble is that Ian's gone on a road trip. He's coming back. He's in a motel for the first time in his life. And when we think about what he's seen in his life, it's hard to imagine, based on the experiences that he's had, how old he is. So he's on this road trip. The hardest thing about that whole drive was putting Gather into a cage for the night, him not being allowed in the room. The nicest thing was, I don't know if you've ever had a room to yourself in a hotel before, but seriously, you can see why people like it. There's a safe in the closet. There's a piece of paper in a bag where you can send off laundry. I bet they've never seen dirty like my clothes got. The bathroom towels are white and smell like bleach, and they're soft as hell. They've got soap for your face, soap for your body, shampoo and conditioner, and not a one of them has been used yet. There's even a shower cap, which is hysterical. What the hell? There's also a tiny fridge, but the sharp told the people at the front desk not to give me the key for it, to which they say they never do, and I'm like, why not? Of course, they tell me, and now I'm in the room all by myself, and there's enough goddamn locks on the door to the hall to keep out the National Guard. So I check out the fridge for half a minute and figure I could get into it if I wanted, but you know I wouldn't. I've got this key card, and I go for a walk. There's ice machines and stairwells and elevators, even though there's only 2 floors. Well, I happen to run into Christine in the main entrance, and I tell her they even have a pool here, indoors, and she says she was just looking for me and banged on my door and figured I must be asleep. She's about to go out and buy me some clothes. Do I want to hop in the car? And I say, no, I'm fine. I just want to look around. And she's like, Ian, you need some new clothes. And I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need new clothes. So she says, stand back for a second. And she looks me up and down. What size shoe? I'm like, 11, but I don't need shoes. She tells me she's still going out, but if I decide I need anything, I can check with the Sharp, who's right next door, as I know, to my room. She'll text. So I'm in my room screwing around with the TV, which is full of dumb shit. There's one show about killer whales, but it ends 2 minutes after I find it, and then there's a knock on the door. It's Christine. She gives me a bag. Clothes for you. I hope skinny jeans are okay, she says. I'm like, what? And she says, skinny jeans? I'm still like, what? And she tells me to never mind. She was just kidding. She got boot cut. But there's also swimming shorts in there, and the pool doesn't close for an hour yet. I'm like, are you coming for a swim too? And she says she's not, but I should go check it out, so I do. I need my key card to let me into the pool room. There's no one else there, and you can't believe the smell of chlorine. There's no diving, so I don't. The place is echoing and shiny and full of straight lines and 3 fake palm trees off to the right there. I go down the steps till the water's up to my waist, and I'm just standing there, listening and looking around till I dunk my head under and swim to the far end, this whole place to myself. It's hard to believe and almost hard to breathe, not wanting to be the only sound of life in a place like this. I'm just used to rivers, I guess. I'm standing with my head just above water, feeling my scar with my fingers, and looking at all these vents in the ceiling must be 30 feet high when a family comes in. A mom, a dad, 3 kids, all girls. The 2 biggest might be twins, maybe 4, 5 years old. They've got plastic blow-up pillows right around their arms for floating. The kids screech and giggle, and the dad drops each one of the older 2 off into the water, and they splash. The mom takes the stairs with the littlest in her arms. You just watch stuff like that. Families. I can breathe again. Dunking my head and holding my breath, I hear the motors of the circulator pumps and the splashes of the kids. When I come up, one of the twins is doggy paddling right over to me, looking like she's on a mission. Leah, calls the mom, and it's echoing. Mind your own business. It's fine, I say, being as it would be weirder still to say nothing at all. She's okay. My words echo. I'm just watching her determination. Leah's. This kid, Leah, she paddles right up, and then she's just bobbing, looking at me. Doesn't have to tread water or anything on account of those floats. I say, hello. The whole family's watching. She says, hello. And she keeps looking at me, not at my eyes so much, but my face. So I smile. Are you a man or a boy? I don't even know how to answer that. I might have chuckled a little. You can think about that question for years, maybe, until you know you become the answer. But she's still looking at me, so I say, I don't know, in between, I guess. How'd you get your owie on your face? She asks me, and I'm like, what? And she says, your owie, how'd you get it? Does it hurt? So I understand, and I'd never be able to explain the railroad bridge and the train and Gather being terrified. So I tell her I got it when I was playing with my dog. And right there you can see she decides. You were playing with your dog? She says, you're a boy.
I love that. It's great. Okay, so leave us with this, Ken. So at Vermont Humanities, we've been trying to ask ourselves, what do we want to be known for? What do we want to be known for? And one of the things is that we want to create conversation. We want to create dialogue. We want to help people ask questions and in community find answers. And one of the questions is, how do we take care of our kids? And I don't mean as parents, I mean as a community, as Vermonters. How do we take care of our kids? And how do we take care of kids like Ian, who are between being a man and a boy and are so self-reliant that they don't ask for help? How do we take care of our kids? Do you want to just leave everybody before we turn it over to questions with advice?
Yeah. I think the critical thing is listening and realizing that their experiences are real, they're formative. I think the number of people who have asked me, why is Gather young adult? And why is it that something that might be accessible to a kid might fall lower on our totem pole of validity is a question we need to ask ourselves. And create a world where they can bring something to the table, where they always know that they're contributing. That's, that's the critical piece.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thanks, Ken. We have a microphone. Is it this one?
Well, actually, everybody has a microphone, so we don't need to take time passing it around. All of you have a microphone at your place. When you're ready to talk, lift up the mic like that and turn and off. So everybody has their own mic. There should be set.
Okay, great. So we'll open it up and see who has questions for Ken.
I have one.
Yes.
I was particularly interested in, I love the book. It's a wonderful and very moving and difficult book to read, depending on your background. I love the question, how do we take care of our children? And I think I'm more aware of what that might mean and all the different permutations of that question now in our culture, because I'm aware that there's some kinds of communities, maybe in oligarchies, if that's a real term, and a real kind of world, where our kids mean the children in your immediate circles. But in what we call our democracy, our world should mean our children in the larger circle. And are we really able to reach out of our immediate circles? I think recently we've become more and more aware of the circles beyond us. So it's a great book. It's a great choice for the Vermont Humanities Council to have made. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I think we're better listeners when we feel listened to. And there is an aspect of pedagogically appropriate practice, which is tangibility. When we need to grow from the roots. And I do feel that so much of our work is preparing kids for something way out there that is not tangible yet. And their contributions are so far away, they don't feel like tangible successes. And, you go to, I'm an educator. My brother-in-law says if you go to Midas, you're going to get a muffler. And you go to an educator, the answer is going to be education. But I do feel that's right. That's where we start. And I think that in education, if we really recognize an immediate and arrange for an immediate contribution to their own community, that's our contribution to them, because they're not going to get it perfect. But they are going to feel like an asset. And I think I think I can tell this story pretty quickly. I used to, whenever a student got called to my office, I would ask them to move something or do something for me. Because if they were in trouble, the first thing they would do when they got into my office would be an asset. And I had this, 90-pound aloe vera plant that I needed to rotate. So it was great because like a kid, this kid could come into my office and I'd be like, hey, can you just do me a favor first? Because the aloe vera plant's burning, And so we'd rotate the aloe vera plant, or we'd move a desk, or I'd have them move something. And until this one frequent flyer came into my office and he said, what do you need me to move now? But the truth is, like, I had a decent rapport with him. And I think the critical thing is, Ruha Benjamin is a sociologist from Princeton who said this thing that when people's value is out of whack with what they actually bring to the world, and that can be on both ends of the spectrum, they'll never stop looking over their shoulder. And I think that's true too with what we do in education. We have to make it tangible for them.
That's great. I gotta just also say, just because I see in the audience a couple of people from the Civic Standard in Hardwick here right now, including the director, Rose Friedman. And there's just a New Yorker article just in the last couple of days about the work that they're doing there, and it's a really amazing example of very palpable ways that communities are expanding to take care of more children than just that inner circle. So this is called the Civic Standard in Hardwick, and the New Yorker article, I can't remember what it's called, but do you remember? The Motley Town. Something about if you just Google Motley Town, New Yorker, it'll come up. Yeah. It's great. Okay, I saw another hand. Yes?
I was just curious to hear from the kids that are here who've read the book and what they thought. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but anybody who wants to talk.
Have any kids here read the book that want to talk? Ooh, there was one here that I know had read it. We saw him earlier, but I think he had to slip away. He was reading it, so might not be done yet. Yeah, we're not going to get any bites. Any other questions? Yes. Yes.
Thank you for writing this book. And what I read it, and then I turned around and read it again. And then on the third reading, I began to imagine what would happen next. And you so well describe class. You name it. You say rich kids, the rich kids this. The rich kids all go to their climbing thing, or the rich kids get all these things. And it's so good to hear that said just right out. I think we don't speak much about class as much as we should. But then I was wondering, okay, so you have Ian, in the end, you have him, or all along maybe, you have him in a classroom writing his story under the mentorship of this teacher. And, excuse me, and I'm wondering, the teacher brings together other students like him and puts them together in a room. So in other words, all the kids with the hard stories, I guess. And they all get together in one room, but we don't hear about the other kids. And we're worried about the language and how he's writing this, which is very interesting. But I'm really curious about what you imagine Ian experience suddenly being in a cohort, a group of other kids like him, because he spends a lot of time trying to hide his own experience, his poverty. He hides it. But here he is with these other kids.
And I wonder whether that's like would you imagine that be kind of a big change for him, a kind of a moment, maybe?
That's a lovely question. You're sparking, you can see why it took me 20 years to write this thing, because I don't think we have time for me to answer it very fully. Writing for me is a profoundly isolation kind of experience, and to be surrounded. So I go up to my cabin, and it's very on purpose. I didn't spend a lot of time on the classroom piece because I wanted that to be a bit of a surprise, to the reader, that he's doing this, that he's telling this for a class. And also the fact that he would stick with it to the end, to be a testament between the relationship, that powerful relationship between a profoundly effective teacher and a student. So I've also done, so I did teach English, and some of my favorite things were the free writes, where the free write was so effective. I would give the kids 20 minutes and then realize at the end of 20 minutes they were still furiously working at it. And maybe that's that's definitely a place where I've veered into, fantasy land, right? That these kids would be that focused. But it's also, to me, hopefully, a reflection of the power of listening, because they were writing because they felt they had something to say, and they knew they would be heard because of the person at the front of the room. So not a complete answer, but a beautiful question. Thank you.
Well, I think it's back to the idea that listening, being heard, is the profound thing that we can do. Maybe even more than the cohort. Yeah. One final question. Who will it be?
Sounds like Wheel of Fortune should be playing in the background.
I don't have a question, but I do have a suggestion. I'm sorry, over here. Did I interrupt someone? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
The Sharp was a significant influence and support for Ian. She was an adult who was not a parent, who could listen to Ian, support Ian, and understand him. There is something significant you can do, all of you in this room, and that is become a mentor. Mentors are adults who work with kids from middle school up to high school. They're there to be with them, to listen to them, and to honor where they are in their development. They're not judging, they're just there. It is a significant and real action that any of you can take if you really want to make a difference in the lives of these kids who really do not have the advantages that the children probably that we've all had have been privy to. Every town in central Vermont, and I would say probably, and I know throughout the state, have mentoring organizations that are there to help kids just like Ian. All you have to do is go to mentoring.org and find out where in your community you can, and the contact in your community, and really do something to change the lives of kids like Ian, who actually really need the support that they don't get from their families for whatever reason. The Sharp made a huge difference in his life. And you can make a difference in kids' lives as well if you'll just take that step and get involved.
Thank you. Should we come back and do? I'm going to come back here to the front and let you ask your final question. Okay.
Thank you. That is so relevant to what I was going to say. We were talking about a broader circle of children and the responsibility of the community. And I've seen it in a mentor here. I've seen it in Susan's husband who taught a kid to tie flies. There are so many, but often we don't know how, as adults, to make these connections with kids. We don't know who needs an advocate. Suggestions?
Making, yeah.
I will repeat the question. Just the ideas that mentors make a difference in kids' lives in whatever form those mentorships take. Let's say you have you want to be a mentor. How would you possibly make a connection with a kid?
Well, the mentoring programs are, I hiked a mountain one time. It was 3 weeks after I started as principal at Oxbow, and they have a big mountain climbing aspect to the school. And the two kids I was walking behind were both talking about their mentors. And I was wiping tears. It does make such a profound difference. Most schools have volunteering opportunities. And I also think, on the part of the schools, I do want to say that the Sharp was a hero. And I think we're dependent, a system that depends on heroics just to meet its basic fundamental needs to really seriously reconsider what it's doing. And get the schools out into the communities, get the communities into the schools. I think we need to facilitate these connections by building trust and by a much more frequent interface.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Ken. Oh, and Ken, are you going to sign books? Ken will be signing books out at the Vermont Humanities table if anyone has theirs.
Yeah, book signing out in the flag room.